Hello and welcome to the FinTech Finance Virtual Arena. And on today's Virtual Arena, we're actually going to be looking at how banks can become smarter and offer up new services to clients in ways we've never seen before. And joining me on today's session, we have Dennis de Weerdt and Kirsten Montig from Deutsche Bank. Guys, thank you for joining me here today. I'm going to, obviously our audience know about your organization, but I'm going to get you guys to kind of introduce yourselves so we can find out a bit more about what you've been working on individually. So Dennis, could we start with you? How are you doing?
All fine here, thank you very much. And great to be here today. So my name is indeed Dennis de Weerdt. I'm working for Deutsche Bank for quite some years now. I'm the global head of the service and implementation organization, as well as for client connectivity, which effectively means that I have roughly 1,000 people across the globe in dealing with day-to-day services for our clients, also doing a project-based implementations, both the project management side of it, as well as technical side of implementations, and also the developments of our whole electronic banking and self-service offering that sits within that whole service organization. So it's a very broad mix of different things that sits within that in that responsibility.
I mean, it sounds like you never have a very relaxing day. So thank you. I'm really excited to hear some of your expertise on today's session. And also, Kirsten, thank you as well for joining. How are you doing?
Good morning. My name is Kirsten Montig. I run client connectivity, which is basically the digital access channels that clients use to consume our products. So channels in that sense comprise, of course, Swift, host to host, plus also our portals, our client self-service tools, and API, of course, the latest trends. And in that world, our aim is really to make it easy for our clients to do business with us and also help them on their own digitization journey, like when it comes to driving their own efficiencies, like reducing their manual work, improving integration with banks and so on. And lastly, of course, we want to drive innovation in that space overall.
That's absolutely excellent. And yeah, I think innovation is going to be one of the key words that we're going to hear today on today's session. And also joining us today, we have Carole Elias from ProgressSoft. Carole, thank you so much for joining. Can you tell our audience a bit more about ProgressSoft and what you've been doing there, please?
Of course. Thank you, Doug. And good morning, everyone. I'm Carole Elias, working in strategy and business development at ProgressSoft. So to give you a brief about the company, we're global providers of payments, clearing, and settlement solutions to financial institutions, ranging from commercial banks to central banks to payment service providers. We've been in the market for over 30 years now, and currently we have a client base of over 370 financial institutions that are utilizing our payment solutions today.
I mean, those are some incredible numbers. So I'm going to be very excited to kind of hear some of the anecdotes and the kind of insights you have from that range of institutions, because really, to kick things off, I think we've got to look at what makes a good customer experience to kind of go further into the conversation. So Kirsten, if I could come to you first, what are the key ingredients that make a great customer experience for a bank?
So client access channels are really the most tangible day-to-day experience our clients have with that. So with us, so in that sense, I think it's quite a good insight in terms of what they need and ask for. Our cash portal alone kind of transacts 600 billion worth of transactions every month. So what we see is that clients really want us to strike the balance between the old instability and the new. And within the kind of old instability, most of our clients really want business continuity, kind of have a connectivity backup solution to ensure business continuity, which was obviously very important kind of in times of COVID. They want us to ensure that they can handle large volumes, that we are there 24/7, and that we can help them also in kind of the conversion services. And then on the new, they really want easiness to access and consume our products anytime and anywhere. So a good example for that is our client self-service tools, which Dennis will elaborate on kind of in more depth later. It's really to enable our clients to do any request, to view, change, or cancel a product features, and kind of get service fully digital.
Absolutely incredible. And I think it's really interesting to kind of showcase, as you did there, just how it's pivoted. Customer experience has pivoted in just 2 years to mean something very different. And Carole, can I also get your perspective as well? Looking at all those various different banks that you work with, have you noticed similar trends?
Definitely. I agree with what Kirsten said. In addition to add to that, from a solution provider's perspective, let's say, there are many things to mention. But firstly, we always try to ensure a unified customer journey for customers on all digital channels or all omni-channels. So if a customer starts a certain process from one channel and for a certain reason they do not complete it at that point and they utilize a different channel, it is very important that they're guided through the same user experience, same user interface environment, and so on. So it makes the user feel as if they're utilizing the same channel, dealing with the same bank, of course, and so on. In addition to providing the minimal number of steps for doing any financial or non-financial service for the bank in terms of user experience. And I would say it goes without saying, banks today need to ensure that any type of service they offer their customers is being offered remotely and digitally. Nothing should require you to attend to the bank's branches anymore.
Yeah, I think that kind of multi-channel approach is going to be so critical going forward now that people are used to having those digital experience. Now, with that in mind, Kirsten, since banking isn't particularly an exciting task, I would say, for a lot of retail customers to carry out, or even business customers to carry out, do banks have to have a similar approach to other industries when it comes to the way they interact with their customers, or do you think it has to be wildly different?
I think it is an exciting task for clients already. Just look at what happened to online banking over the last few years in retail, right? And that trend has already hit the corporate business. So I think customer experience is on top of the agenda of any industry now, so also in banking. So I wouldn't say it's completely different to other industries. And just looking at the number of touch points clients have with banks, particularly in payments, it's of course of the essence that banks get this right. So the way we approach this at DB is really to start with the client need, and that's an iterative process. So we have a lot of client service reviews from Dennis's world, and then we have obviously dedicated client workshops with the clients to really understand what it is they're looking for. And what they're looking for obviously differs per client segment. And the problems that we see that they're looking for to be solved is like, how can they better integrate with clients? How can they reduce their manual work? How can they get kind of a real-time product? It's the omnichannel component that we just talked about. It's data analytics, and it's kind of technology trends such as API, robotics, and digital currencies. So in these sessions with the clients, we really listen and we proactively bounce back market trends that we observe and to hear back what they kind of find useful. And then obviously we take that feedback and translate that into kind of new products using latest technology.
I think that's absolutely exciting to be able to hear that not only are these data insights being kind of helping you fine tune existing products, but they can actually go ahead and look to create brand new banking products. And I think, Kirsten, you are right there. I think people are now talking about their customer experience from their bank more and more. You know, it is becoming something that people trade in a commodity in terms of, I am going to go and choose that bank for a different reason other than just, for instance, I've always banked with them. They actually offer up this service to me. And I think that's absolutely brilliant. And Dennis, I'm going to come to you, but I also want to get, from that kind of service provider perspective as well. Carole, can I also ask, do you agree that the way that banks interact with customer experience has changed?
This has definitely changed, but I would say this is not only looking at the sector. I mean, all sectors have changed the way they interact with customers, the user experience. Everything has to be now very intuitive, more user-friendly. User interface has to be more attractive. But what I think is most important here is that banks should focus on going beyond the traditional banking. So not only look at the traditional banking and financial services they used to today provide, and they need to start becoming part of their customers' non-financial lives. So what I mean by that is introducing new services that would suit the day-to-day routines of customers. So for example, the recent demands such as gamification, location-based recommendations, personal financial management, and again, go beyond the traditional banking. So yes, the more banks are in touch with their customers today, the more likely they are able to retain those customers or attract new ones.
Incredible. Now, with that in mind, we've been talking, bubbling away in the background has been this kind of omni-channel approach. And Dennis, I've got to get, your perspective on this, running all those different channels, how critical is that omni-channel approach now? Has that become the key KPI when it comes to customer experience?
Yeah, I think it actually is a very interesting journey, right? So 2 years ago we started to push the organization and also the external world to start making use of things like digital signatories and digital ways of doing service. And then of course we had the pandemic coming in, and all of a sudden we got a lot of pull from the market to start doing these things. So if there is any kind of silver line to be found there, then that's the one, that the whole digital development got an enormous boost. It is still the case, however, that we need to find that really good balance with our corporate client base, where my team almost have 1.6 million interactions per annum.
Wow.
And within that, you can see the full range of clients and all the needs they have. So I think real time is a critical statement to make. Real time is something that is almost a commodity these days, that clients do expect it. Also, the multi-bank solutions are key things that clients and corporates are looking for. But also from there, really core advisory and value add conversations that they still would like to have on a person by person basis, albeit via Zoom or be it via Teams or anything like that. But that's still something that will continue to exist in my view. And next to that, and that's the balancing act altogether between digital value add conversations, there's also a security component that we should not underestimate. There is a component that we as banks, of course, are to be seen as a trustworthy environment where you can have a safe conversation, safe instructions, payments to be executed in a safe way. And all of that into the mix makes this a very exciting place to be, because within that balance, we are indeed turning the corner now, that we are having the right solutions, working with partners, also multi-bank solutions to make all of that happen. Still, the differentiating factor, as we tend to see it, is the level of service you are able to provide, especially when there is a need for that value add conversation to take place. Yeah. And don't get me wrong, I think even in the value add conversations, digital solutions, digital product information, digital product selections, all of that type of stuff can really support that conversation as well. But it's really that mix that we believe where the future of client differentiation and client satisfaction will actually exist. So that's a really exciting place to be, if I can say it like that.
Yeah, and I completely agree. And it kind of leads me to ask a question that I don't think enough people are asking. You know, we've always talked about how exciting the fintech banks are because they have that digital approach down. But actually, I feel like banks like Deutsche Bank are in an interesting position. So, I mean, I'm not going to ask Kirsten and Dennis this question because I know what the answer will be. But Carole, if I could come to you, do you think that traditional banks actually have an upper hand going into 2021 beyond because they can leverage that physical presence alongside the digital one?
Well, that's a great question. But from our perspective, and if we look at the digital frontrunners today, I would say we see that both traditional and neobanks or digital banks, digital-only banks, are dominating the market. Each has an advantage over the other. So, for example, if we're looking at neobanks, they benefit from the digital framework that they have built essentially to cater for these new innovative, let's say, market needs. Traditional banks would require transformational efforts to be able to achieve that. But this is thankfully to such solutions such as, for example, Payments Hub. They're being able to do that with minimal changes on their systems, a seamless shift to their legacy systems and disruption on their existing infrastructure. Neobanks would have the upper hand in catering for new generations, let's say. They're already building their services in that manner. However, traditional banks also have an advantage of their existing client base and the trust they have already established throughout the years with their existing clients. So I would say there's an advantage for each, but the most important thing for both would be that this year moving forward, agility and time to market would be the things that would determine the success of a bank in this era of frictionless banking experiences.
Yeah. So with that in mind, then, Dennis, Carole's obviously mentioned that, that she thinks that agility is the key KPI nowadays. You obviously brought up the trust aspect before. Do you still think it might just be different customers want to get different things from their bank? For instance, maybe some of the private customers want that trust more than the agility. I mean, what are you seeing from Deutsche Bank's perspective?
Well, it's exactly like Carole said, right? We need to be ready for also the new generations that have grown up in a different way than some of us may have. And therefore we need to be ready for that. And we are, of course, gearing towards that whole direction. What is interesting maybe to build on is the fact that a lot of fintech and big tech companies are finding partnerships with, let's say, traditional banks. And the core reason why is not only because of the client base that we of course have, but especially also the trust component, but especially the regulatory experience that we have. So we have years of regulatory experience on how to deal with clearings, regulations, developments on a local level even, that sometimes go into the, let's say, difficult direction rather than saying the wrong direction, a difficult direction, which is something that we as banks have a lot of experience with. So whenever there's a fintech or a new bank sometimes popping up, they are seeking our cooperation quite often to say, okay, how can we be that real innovative digital and front end while we still process and use the infrastructure, including all the regulatory reporting, including all the regulatory complexity within that solution. And we see more and more where maybe 5 years ago it was kind of maybe a threat or disruption in that sense. The partnership in the last 3 years and still growing has really picked up on that field. And therefore, that's also why I believe that the multi-bank solutions and the innovative part and the front end versus the infrastructure and the regulatory and security components need to go hand in hand back to that balancing act that I stated earlier in this conversation.
Yeah, it's always kind of that traditional role of a bank of mitigating risk, but also finding that innovative spark. And Deutsche Bank hasn't been around since I think 1870, all the way to now for a reason. So I think that's completely true. And Kirsten, now if we look at it on the flip side, how can we move from, obviously, as we mentioned, a bank starting in 1870, keeping up with these digital first banks? What's Deutsche Bank got up its sleeve?
There's indeed a lot of exciting opportunities out there, so you really have to focus so you don't tackle them all at once. So for me, front end in that sense is one thing, but the digital offering is also about the processes behind it, as Dennis just said. So if you don't get that right, you will not be fast and you will not have comprehensive offering for your clients. So in that sense, clients will still need the old like core payments, identity, KYC, and so on. And of course, the security aspects that we already discussed. So clients do trust banks, and we have all seen cybercrime accelerating. And I personally find it quite amazing that banks have managed that extremely well so far. And then I see also big opportunity in standards across banks that help create a truly nice digital experience. I'm convinced that innovation and payments must occur at the network level, i.e. across banks. And banks do have such corporations already. Just look at SWIFT. So with more standardization and joint development of innovation, such processes will be driven very efficiently, which comes as a benefit for the client, right? As banks can co-create and with that spend the money saved on new solutions. And then of course, this is also about partnering, which is super important. And lastly, I think there's a big opportunity for banks because we can observe what is happening on the retail banking side. So trends, as I said earlier, often start there. So one must pay very close attention and then turn them into opportunities in the corporate and institutional sector.
Yeah, and one of those opportunities is really the changing nature of payments. They have become increasingly complex, probably because of how successful the new payments innovations have been. So Carole, how critical is it now for a digital first bank to innovate at the same kind of pace when it comes to payment technology and payment innovation? I've got to ask you, do you agree that payment technology and innovation has been key really to the changing role of a bank going forward?
Definitely, Doug. I agree with you, and it is indeed very critical. So I would say that banks need to be very meticulous and careful and focus on the flexibility and resilience of the infrastructure they choose. Basically, what I mean by that is, or the idea behind that is utilizing smart modular solutions built on microservices architecture, for example, for the bank's middleware. These would be the engines connecting, as Kirsten said, the front-end channels of the banks by being able to upgrade them with the back-end systems. This would ensure that whatever would be needed in the future can be seamlessly and easily implemented with a very fast time to market. And ease of adding new functionalities, integrating with any new products the bank would want to acquire The bank would have a certain roadmap, but they would not necessarily know the trends that would be coming in the years to come. So they need to have the right infrastructure to make all of this process easier. So basically, I would say that digital first banks or neobanks, when they're established, they should have continuous change of demands, rules, standardization, and all of that already in mind whenever they're making decisions of the solutions, infrastructures, and solutions they're acquiring.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be really critical, and we've kind of started touching on it more and more. Kirsten obviously brought up the changing standards in payments as well, and Carole, you brought it up in terms of how it's changing from making everything from front end to back end very seamless. So Dennis, do you also agree that despite how you can have a really good looking front end on your system, but does it have to be connected to a also truly great back end as well?
Yes, of course. I think that the way that people within technology and also within our developments, we are talking about it. We have a front end, we have a middle layer, and we have, of course, a back end. And I think especially that middle layer must be multi-purpose. Yeah. So multi-purpose in the sense of there could be, let's say, the normal electronic banking channels, which many of our clients still use on a day-to-day basis. Next to that, direct API connections, where also Kirsten referred to earlier and has a lot more expertise in that field as well as direct connections straight from us as a bank into ERP and TMS systems in order to make all of that work as well. So you can see that middle layer is kind of where the real difficulty sits on one hand, but also the opportunity sits. So if you do that particular part really well, then it can serve both your clients that need to have that, let's say, existing base, as well as API connectivities, as well as direct connections. And maybe one more thing to add to that, the real word that is all about the new technology is real time. 24/7, real time, instant type payments. And this is again where both the opportunity sits, but also the challenge sits of an instant check on sanctions and embargoes, an instant check of a query that maybe a client may have or a third-party bank may have in that whole process. Yeah. And again, this is where we have a lot of experience. So this is hopefully where we can continue to make a difference while the whole world is indeed developing towards that 24/7 instant payment, real-time information flow that is expected to happen. And we are ready for it. So where a few years ago we were talking about it, now we actually have those type of solutions for real to start using them. And also, again, with partners like Carole and her company to make that work.
Amazing. Yeah. And I think you've also started kind of talking about how, when you're talking about that kind of 24/7, 7 days a week system, when it comes to payments, that's already difficult because you used to have that kind of downtime where you could make sure everything was going right. But then when you apply that to onboarding and KYC, suddenly that becomes even more stressful. So, I mean, it's also a really big customer experience pain point. So, Carole, can I ask, when it comes to keeping up with regulations, especially KYC ones, as we've seen in Australia, how important is keeping the onboarding experience done in a digital method, safe and secure, but also in a really kind of seamless way so you can actually onboard the people in a quick time?
Definitely. Now, just as any other type of financial or non-financial service offered by banks in the past and now being offered through digital channels or omnichannels, the same applies to onboarding. It has to follow the regulations. It has to integrate with the needed entities for any sanctions screening, AML, and so on. And this is revolutionary today because onboarding or remote onboarding would expand the geographic presence of banks without having to establish new branches, so new opportunities for banks. I would say the more automated the process is at the bank and to have instant, let's say, approvals or verifications, the more seamless integrations it has with any third parties will make the process much faster and more instantaneous. But we're looking specifically on regulations. So regulations affect most of the banking body services. Financial institutions need to ensure that whatever services they're providing digitally, one, they're following the regulations pertaining to that specific service in terms of regulations, and two, they're applying all methods like technically that would mitigate the risk on the institutions. So when you're talking about onboarding, it is the entry point, the first point you have to any prospect customer you still haven't identified to be joining your bank and providing them with all of the services. So you have to ensure a safe, scam-proof process. And once you follow the regulations, apply the needed technical solutions for that, you should be good to go.
Amazing. Now, that sounds absolutely perfect to kind of have that system in place, because it is the beginning of the customer journey. But Kirsten, as the the resident API expert on here, I'm interested. When it comes to onboarding, can you just effectively use API technology to onboard, to use or collaborate or partner with a KYC partner? Is that something that can happen, or does, when it comes to onboarding and KYC, is that something that has to be done from within the bank?
I think you definitely can use API and a kind of centralized solution, and there is this kind of Swift conglomerate in place that is really kind of planning to use that. So I think most definitely you can use that. Yes.
Okay, amazing. Now, Dennis, with that in mind, will onboarding some customer digitally ever be as safe as onboarding someone in person?
Well, that's a very good question. I think there are three components in that. So one is indeed that, let's say, the Swift KYC developments that are taking place, and they probably will reach 90% of the, let's say, common requirements across banks that are required. Then still, the location of the client, the location of the bank, the location where the client wants to do business are all in the mix of that last 10% of requirements to be taken care of. And that will be different whether that bank is dealing out of Russia or out of Germany or out of the US. And that's what we need to make sure, that solutions that are, first of all, having that base of 90% coverage across all the banks, that next set of developments is gearing towards, okay, what are those differentiating factors in the three components that I just mentioned: client location, bank location, and location of doing business. And with that, I think that there is still some years to go, probably, to make all of that really, really standardized. But getting to 90% will satisfy a lot of corporates already compared to what they experience today. So that's one component. The second component, I think, is a development of what we call digital ID, where we believe that the government-led identifications, like in the Netherlands, we have digital ID, DigID, then we have in Germany, you have Verimi, these type of developments on, let's say, the more developed countries, you will see more and more happening, and we are to link up to that. So the individual that you're talking to is already identified with a qualified definition. The third component is digital signatures. Once you have identified the person, then from there, having a digital signature exchange is the way to go. There is no paper-based developments anymore to happen. In my view, digital signatories is the only way that we can go, not only as an organization, but as a total society, taking climate and all these type of things into account. So, and therefore sustainability. So these are the three components that I believe will continue to develop, and there's no stopping that anymore. And again, that makes it exciting, but therefore also that sits with the challenge if you're dealing with a bank that is operating in 50 odd countries. Right?
I can imagine, because it goes beyond just security and all these regulations that were brought up. At the heart of it, every customer experience is different depending on which culture you go to. For instance, as you mentioned, in Germany, there's a lot of video onboarding, but in Russia, that might not be the same. So I'm not envious of your guys' kind of task to go away and kind of create that ultimate customer experience. But it sounds like, really, from Carole, Kirsten, Dennis, thank you so much. I mean, it's been an absolute masterclass in how to kind of create that, and it's been absolutely brilliant. I think we've touched on regulation, we've touched on the technology, we've touched on what the customer demands are as well within that. So thank you all three of you for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I hope you've enjoyed yourselves as well.
Many thanks. Absolutely.
Thank you, Doug.
Well, thank you, and also to our viewers as well. You can catch the rest of the series and much more over at www.fintechf.com, and of course YouTube and LinkedIn, where I will see you in the comments. So once again, guys, thank you very much, and goodbye.